Welcome back to Everything and Nothing, the podcast where we discuss that one time that I woke up in a bathtub full of ice with a mysterious pain in my side. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Accounting for Games, also known as the man of my dreams. Introduce yourself, Accounting for Games. Make yourself
Matt,
heard.
I'm not sure that I can really top Man of Your Dreams, to be honest. I almost feel like the rest of my life really has just been leading up to that moment. So I feel like just getting involved in this, I think I could die quite happily now, to be honest.
Well, you talk the talk, but you haven't responded to any of my letters. So,
Well, that's because of the restraining order that's been
I
going on.
I keep my distance. I keep my distance. I send letters, but I keep my distance.
Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Oh no. But yeah, I'll segue from there. Yeah, I'm accounting for games. I have a very small YouTube channel that's just peaked at 262 subscribers.
Woo!
Hell yeah. But that's pretty good. I've been running it for about a year. I specialize in geeky World War II strategy games from about a decade ago, and Third Age Total War, which is a overhaul mod of Medieval 2 Total War, and I play a particular submod of that mod called Divide and Conquer, which for anyone that's into Lord of the Rings, you've probably heard of that particular mod. And I will be hosting a mirror of this podcast on my channel.
I have to know. I have to admit, I'm not drawn to these bizarre strategy games, but I haven't tried them. I want you to sell them to me. I want you to sell them to me in as many words as you like.
Which particular one?
Oh, dude, I don't know. They're identical to me.
Okay, well, it's very selling it to someone that isn't a complete history geek like me when it comes.
I am a history geek.
Okay, well, I would say then, especially the World War II game, Hearts of Iron 3 with the Black Ice submod is the greatest World War II simulator of all time. From a standpoint of you get a huge amount of information, and when you start adding some events mods like I the particular mod list I use is the following. So I stick to, and this is the game I play off camera normally. I play Black Ice version 9.11 with the Third Reich events mod, German graphical augment, and unique units of the Third Reich. And it adds in so much historical information and data about the time in such a constructive and intelligent way that it's not only a video game at that point, it's a history lesson in every playthrough. And if there's one thing that's important, I think, for trying to reach younger people when it comes to history, it's giving them an avenue that teaches them while also being interesting. And Hearts of Iron 3 and Hearts of Iron 4 to a certain extent both have that interactive element, and that's part of the reason why I like it, and I've tried to keep these games alive, especially Hearts of Iron 3. It's so intensive on micromanagement and things, but when it comes to the sort of defining moments of the war, there's not a better avenue to learn about it, I don't think, than in this game. I can't recommend it enough, to be honest. But feel free to check out my channel and, shameless plug here, and have a look at it yourself. I'm playing as France at the moment, during 1940.
That's not a good time to be France.
It's not a good time to be France. But in my world, we have inflicted something like 1 million casualties on the Germans.
The French resistance were boss.
The thing is, there's so many misconceptions about France during World War II. The average French soldier in the average French division fought extremely well when you actually look at their battle record, but they were let down chronically by the senior command elements on a strategic level. So when you look at that in more detail, and you look at, you give them a competent commander like me, and suddenly they're a force to be reckoned with. You can make the argument that several of the French tank designs, for example, were actually better than the German designs of the same period. The only sort of pivotal element that the Germans really had over the French tank designs was the three-man turret and radio equipment, whereas the French, some of their tanks were a little bit lacking in relation to crew ergonomics and radio equipment. But there's a little bit of a boring history chat for
You are
you.
just schooling me right now. Schooling me. I
If you
love
ever
it.
get a chance, look up the Shah B1.
I've got to be honest. You have
The
officially
Shah.
sold these. You've sold these games to me.
I can sell you Divide and Conquer in one go. It's Lord of the Rings, and you can send hobbits into battle.
You made a fatal mistake there.
Why?
You made one fatal mistake.
Which was?
I can't stand Lord of the Rings. I said it. There I said it. I admit it. I confess.
I don't think we can be friends. I I I don't think we can be friends anymore.
Well,
I think I have
we
to
ha-
leave this chat.
we haven't been friends since you filed the restraining order.
Oh, of course. Oh, that was because of Lord of the Rings.
That was-
Now I'm remembering. It's all coming back to me.
We were
Oh,
madly in love, and,
yes.
and then
It's
okay,
just not.
I had to read it. I had to read Lord of the Rings, and the prose is just terrible. It's just awful, and the movies are so they're not for me. I can appreciate them, but it's just not my thing.
You can appreciate them on a
I can
cinematic
appreciate
level,
them.
can't you?
Yes, I can appreciate them on a cinematic level. They've got lots of like really impactful moments, or moments that I can believe would be impactful to someone who gave a rat's ass. Um, I love my film noir. I'm
I
a
know.
film noir guy. I love my soulful dramas and murder mysteries. I'm kind of pigeonholing myself here because I love all kinds of movies. I mean, I stand by one of my favorite movies of the last decade being La La Land, which I think is a grossly misunderstood picture.
Are you sure you're not actually talking about Moonlight?
Let me just check the cards they gave me. But I'm gonna wait for the La La Land crew to come over and thank me for praising their movie before I then say, oh no, sorry, I meant Moonlight. I get them mixed up constantly. They're basically exactly the same movie. When
Of
you think about it.
course.
They're the same movie. I mean, one of them is a musical about jazz and two middle class white people, and the other is a tragic, beautiful, bittersweet coming of age story that's the opposite of everything I just said. So
They're very easy to get mixed up, aren't they? When you look at them both and you watch them both. I mean, if you watch them back to back, you wouldn't know really where one film ended and the other one began.
you could do a supercut and you wouldn't even know. You know,
Jesus Christ.
you could do a supercut and you wouldn't even know. I love Moonlight as well, by the way. Moonlight was a beautiful film.
Oh, it was. I have nothing against Moonlight, and I also am quite a big fan of La La Land. It's quite an interesting film, and I would say that I like La La Land less from a story standpoint and more from a cinematic point of view. The cinema photography in it is pretty amazing, I think, and the sound mixing and the sound design is pretty great as well.
I feel like a lot of people criticize La La Land for kind of licking the Hollywood boots.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it is. I always took it to be extremely scrutinizing of Hollywood. And I wrote, like, one of the very first pieces I wrote on my stupid blog that no one reads.
I read it.
You read it because you love me. Even in spite of Lord of the Rings and the
restraining order, yeah.
You don't need to be near me to read the blog.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I can just pretend you don't write it, and then it's great.
Well, I do go by a handle, so it's fine. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I point out, like, in the first paragraph, I point out how, like, the whole opening is this scene where these people are singing and they're dancing about having left their life behind to make it big in Hollywood, to live in the glamour of the Hollywood Hills, you know. And all of them have, like, really sound professions and perfectly stable, happy lives. You know, you got that one woman who's in this perfectly stable relationship with this guy that she just dumps to go and make it big. And the irony of it is that they're all stuck in traffic on the freeway. Yeah. They are all literally and figuratively going nowhere. And you will notice that the movie frequently cuts back to the traffic. It's like a leitmotif, you know. And in the end, I mean, he makes it. They both make it, but it comes at the cost of the relationship that we spent the whole movie building up to.
It's quite a striking visual metaphor, isn't it?
You're a striking visual metaphor.
But it is, you know, the idea that it's, you know, it is a traffic jam. And just to be clear here, I thought I'd make your audience aware. I'm not a film major. So if anything that I say is newbie and inconsequential, you have that to blame.
And
and
we
this
will
guy for bringing me on.
vindicate. We will vindicate.
Yes, yeah, and I look at it from the standpoint of an average moviegoer in many respects. And I watched La La Land. I think with my girlfriend, actually, we watched that together. And I loved it. I was so disappointed when it didn't win Best Picture, actually. There were so many parts of it that were insightful and meaningful, but on it's a lot of subtext, isn't there, in the film? That's sort of what I get out of it more than anything.
I'm not. Would you say you're disappointed with Moonlight having won?
I wouldn't. I would say. I mean, not to get too political here, but is Moonlight winning for the right reasons? That's always what comes back to me with the Academy Awards.
I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, which I really shouldn't, because they are a soulless, horrible corporation.
Exactly.
But I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say, regardless of their motivations, I was completely happy with Moonlight winning, even though I would have likewise been happy for La La Land to win.
I think probably for me, the reason why it hit me like it did was the way, I reference it as a joke, but the way that they, do you know what I mean, announced it, let them walk up and then,
yeah. Oh,
like
they came so close.
You can just not watch Emma Stone break, Yeah.
How do you feel about Parasite winning?
See, I really liked Parasite. I think Parasite is really good. Would be how I would define it.
Very astute, thank you.
Yeah. It's difficult because on the one hand, I mean, there's one film that I always sort of come back to from, I think, did Mad Max Fury Road come out in 2015? I can't for the life of me remember what won that year.
I think it was Spotlight.
Yeah.
And I hated Spotlight. Spotlight was a very cartoony...
It was a
very one-dimensional, very cartoony film where there was tons of exposition and they said everything out loud. Like, I remember it really bothering me. I remember there was this, like, one image in Spotlight that, for me, is the apotheosis of everything that's wrong with Spotlight, where they're having a conversation with one of the victims who's now grown up. For those of you who don't know what Spotlight is about, it's basically about a newspaper trying to bring down pedophilia in the church.
It's a great story.
It's a great story. It's a great setup for a story. It's just executed with all the finesse of a reversing dump truck without a rear view mirror. So you've got this bit where they're interviewing this guy and they're talking to this guy on a bench, and you've got this really striking image of like children playing in a playground just behind them. And then in the background, there's this church, and you've got this instant kind of like harrowing juxtaposition of the church.
Do you know what? In this case, that scene's always reminded me of? You know, the Slender Man. I always pictured the church as the Slender.
Well, but keep this is like let's think about this from the perspective of like a director making a movie and thinking of like a striking image. And in an image, you've got this harrowing kind of juxtaposition of the church, which in this case represents something really dark and insidious, and the playground in the foreground. In an image, it captures the conflicts.
Yeah.
But then the dude literally turns to it and says, "Oh, a church right next to a playground. Isn't that ironic?" or something like that. I'm like, you don't need to tell us this. We're not stupid.
we know. We understand subtext.
we're not idiots. And the whole movie was like that, and it ripped off like its entire visual style just felt like completely ripped off of All the President's Men to me. And All the President's Men was like a really slick kind of Cold War movie. Yeah, Spotlight didn't deserve to win, is what I'm saying.
So what I'm sort of getting to is I watched the awards that year in full, and I mean, as a film, I'm not saying it's the most well-written story, but Mad Max Fury Road is, as a film, on a technical level, probably, I don't want to say the greatest film ever, but from a purely technical perspective, from the amount of work that they put into the effects, and bearing in mind it's all, there is CGI in it, but it's not like it's Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, is it? It is on location with full on
a lot of practical
physical effects. And then you give the award to Spotlight, and you Mad
Max Fury Road was a blast. Let's just get that out there. It was a blast.
It was a great film. And what I'm trying to say is here, you've got two different points of looking at sort of film, haven't you? Or at least in my opinion, the way I look at film. You have film as a storytelling device, and you have film as in my
Technical.
opinion, a technical and an art
Yeah.
form.
Yeah, I think what you're
And
saying is right. I think I wouldn't go as far as to say Mad Max Fury Road is the most technically competent movie ever
I
made. It's
wouldn't
very
say
impressive.
it's very
It's
impressive.
I think you're forgetting about Neil Breen's Double Down.
Oh, of course. Sorry. Where he
Like
waves a wrench at the back of his car. Um,
to attach
but
some, what is it, like satellite dishes? I don't know.
yes, but my annoyance with Academy Awards is that often you find technical awards and things that are looked down on,
Mm.
but you put Tom Hanks in a film and tell him to play a character, he's going to win it or be nominated, and you
Tom Hanks is the most overrated actor of all time. Cough, cough,
he
cough.
is,
Real
and
cough that I'm doing.
nothing against him. I think he's been in a lot of great films, and a lot of films, for schlocky films, I really like Saving Private Ryan. It's a great schlocky action film with a lot of quite harrowing imagery. I really like Apollo 13,
I do have a soft spot for Forrest Gump, I've got to admit.
and Forrest Gump is great. And then even some of his early stuff, Big he got nominated for Big, didn't he?
I've got a question before we get too off the rails. I have a
Yeah.
question. What is your favorite Mad Max film? That might be a dumb question because it seems likely to me you're going to say Fury Road, but what
No,
is what is it
Road
not?
Warrior.
Road Warrior. Okay, I guess that's pretty predictable as well. Is
And
there
then
any reason why Road Warrior
because Mel
is
Gibson.
because Mel Gibson? Normally that's a downside. Normally that's a downside for people.
It wasn't at the time, was it?
No. Um,
Um,
I understand that the movie What Women Want is about a guy who can read women's minds. But I remember before I knew what that movie was about, I looked at the cover with Mel Gibson and who is it? What's her name? I don't remember her name. I remember looking at that and thinking, is Mel Gibson what women want? Really?
no, I don't think he's really what anyone wants. No, I really like Road Warrior. I think part of the reason why I like Road Warrior is less about the film and more of the impact that it had on a lot of the different things that I enjoy today, like Fallout.
Yeah.
You can make the argument that they're probably Fallout as it is today and the post-apocalyptic genre, so to speak, wouldn't be what it is today. I
Without
don't
Mad
think
Max.
without Road Warrior
Um,
specifically.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate and disagree with you because I think there's a lot of really. I mean, Living Prose, the guy on Curmudgeon Media who writes about literature, he just did a great piece about post cataclysm literature.
okay.
Um, there's a lot of there's an overwealth of really good
Oh,
post
oh,
cataclysm literature. I
don't get
mean,
me wrong. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all.
I just think you've got, especially with Fallout. Fallout is so deeply entrenched in the Cold War. I know it's like a Watchmen style sort of alternate,
Alternative
yeah,
timeline. Yeah.
but it's still so heavily entrenched in the Cold War in a way that I don't think Mad Max is as overtly. I know Mad Max has those obvious kind of the looming threat of destruction which can be attributed to the Cold War, but less
Yeah.
overtly than something like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Those thick of the Cold War, Philip K. Dick kind of novels. I would say they were more instrumental in my opinion.
Oh, I'm not. You can also point to sort of your classic sci-fi serials as well, can't you? A lot of at least
Like Quantum Leap.
a lot of that sort of classic, a lot of the at least look of Fallout is sort of more sci-fi, your bizarre, like George Lucas and his love
Oh, don't remind me of
of
him.
of sci-fi.
I think I'm not going to say it's the best, but my favorite Mad Max film is the first one.
Ooh,
Yeah, which is not a popular opinion. I think no, I don't think a lot of people
interesting.
I don't think a lot of people dislike the first one. I think the first one is still considered like a good
It's a good
movie.
film. It's a good film.
But it's often considered secondary to I was going to say Thunder Road. Oh no.
Road
To
Warrior.
it's often considered secondary to the Bruce Springsteen classic Thunder Road, which is fair enough because that is a
Yeah.
magnificent song. I just something about the story of a man of a lawman in a world without law. To me, that just captures that feeling of alienation that you should have in the post-apocalypse. He's such a lonely character, and that angle for me is so important of the lawman in a world where law is not only non-existent, it's actively thrown completely out the window.
So what you're saying is that The Walking Dead copied Mad Max.
What I'm saying is that 9/11 was an inside job. Yes, let's forget The Walking Dead exists because.
Please, let's forget The Walking Dead. Can you? Is there a cure to forgetting? Is it bleach? Is that how you cure?
What I normally do, my routine, is to bash my head against the wall like 15 times a day.
Like Glenn when he got hit with a baseball bat.
And then he says, "I'll find you," and it's like, what does that mean? Your brain is showing, Glenn. What does
Stop
that
it, Glenn.
mean?
Stop. Put your eyes back.
Oh man.
Obviously, the writers of Game of Thrones wrote.
Oh, the Jeffrey Dean Morgan is wasted in that. Wasted. And I don't just mean he showed up to set drunk. I mean he's a great actor who was wasted in a terrible show.
I mean, this is why I'm on this podcast. I'm here to talk about Mad Max with you. I'm here to get told that Mad Max 1 is your favourite, and to have Lord of the Rings shit on. That's literally why I'm here.
And we're also here to negotiate the terms of the restraining order, which I'm hoping you will lift by the end.
Oh, okay. I am thinking about it. I mean, all this talk of Lord of the Rings is it's not weighing in your favour.
Come on, we've talked about Lord of the Rings barely. We've talked more about everything else. Give me some credit.
I'll give you some credit. I mean, in fairness, we've got to talk about Mad Max, so I'm quite happy. I can't even remember. We were talking about Academy Awards, weren't we? And I was making a comment about Moonlight. Let me just segue back to Moonlight, sorry, and just say that I did like Moonlight a lot, and I was happy in a way that it won. I was just a bit unhappy that La La Land lost.
Either way,
who directed La La Land?
That was Damien Chazelle, who did Whiplash. Damien Chazelle, I think, is a fantastic director. I think he's
Isn't Whiplash great?
Whiplash is beautiful. I think he's a better screenwriter than he is a director. And I think the biggest tragedy of his latest movie, which was First Man, is that he didn't write it, and that was a huge letdown.
Well, I'm a big fan of the writer-director.
Yeah.
I feel like
it's very pure expression. Occasionally you'll get like a really nice duo who work really well together, like Charlie Kaufman and Spike Jonze, who obviously did like an Adaptation and Being John Malkovich, both of which are just beautiful. Adaptation, in my opinion, is the greatest meta comedy ever made.
Really?
Have you seen Adaptation?
Oh, well, no. I've seen it. I've seen the title and things. But
Do you know what it's about?
No.
Okay,
No.
So Adaptation, greatest Nicolas Cage performance ever. But basically, the story behind how Adaptation was made was that in real life, Charlie Kaufman, the writer Charlie Kaufman, was challenged with adapting a book called The Orchid Thief into a movie, which he just couldn't do because it's terrible. And the prose is all over the place. He could not figure out how to do it. So what he did was he wrote a movie about him trying to figure out a way to adapt The Orchid Thief into a movie, which he can't figure out how to do. So he makes a movie about him trying to figure out how to make, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's this like meta narrative. It's this meta story kind of. But the thing is that he creates certain fictional characters, or one fictional character, which is his non-existent twin brother, Donald. And they're both played by Nicolas Cage, and they're both exceptional. And sort of within it, you've got this struggle of the artist versus the kind of the sellout. So Charlie Kaufman is trying to make art, and his brother is just making schlock that will make money. I'm not trying to say that I believe in high art or low art, because I don't, but it's like that's what's going on in the story. And then at one point, Charlie Kaufman cannot figure out how to end this story. So he gives the story over to Donald Kaufman to finish it. And then the rest of the movie is written by Donald Kaufman. The rest of the movie, it just turns into like a thriller. It goes from being a biopic into a thriller, where Donald Kaufman heroically sacrifices himself. And Donald Kaufman, the non-existent person, is actually credited in the real credits of the movie. He's actually credited.
Oh, okay.
It's such a brilliant setup for a movie. So there are some like perfect director writer duos. And this has nothing to do with anything. I'm rambling, but
it works, doesn't it, when you get a team that know each other and work closely. And normally, director, writer, I just think normally if you've got it
two for
one role,
it means that when you're adapting what's on the page, you have a much more clear expression of what you want to do with it.
Exactly.
There's no kind of
And you don't
nothing
end
gets
up with
lost in
something like
translation.
Batman v Superman, not verse v, which of course is one of the greatest films ever written and deserves,
All the
I mean,
awards.
all the awards. I mean,
Just all the awards. I mean, the bit when it turns out their mothers have the same name.
Arthur,
Their mothers have the same name, which is, I mean, it's like that bit.
Arthur.
It really reminded me of the bit at the end of Citizen Kane. The bit at the end of Citizen Kane when
Please stop.
when it
I
turns out that
can't.
Rosebud, it turns out that
No,
Rosebud was the
no,
name of.
don't say it. Don't
turns out
say it.
turns out that Rosebud
Don't
was the
draw a
name.
link between Citizen Kane and Batman v Superman. I can't handle it. I'll die
turns
if
out
you do that.
it
I
turns out
can't.
that Rosebud is the name
No,
of
don't do it. I'm telling you, I just said no. Don't do it. I know you want to. Don't do it.
I can't believe that I just compared Citizen Kane to Batman v Superman.
And
I mean,
this is why I'm here on this podcast. I
obviously,
want to
obvious,
drive the discussion towards nonsense.
obviously, Batman v Superman is 10 times the movie Citizen Kane wishes it was. But when it turns out that Rosebud is Citizen Kane's mum and also Batman's mum, um,
I'm broken.
um,
I'm
and
crying.
I found it really jarring how Charles Foster Kane was just like killing people all over the place.
He wasn't just trashing rooms. He was
Yeah,
he was
it's like
trashing people.
the bit in Citizen Kane Rises when, when Charles Foster Kane says, "I have one rule, and that rule is that he doesn't kill." I just found it I have to say, I found it really jarring. Um,
You're scarred, aren't you?
Quite a lot of me died forever. I honestly, truth be told, I really don't care about Batman v Superman. I watched it and I left and I was
Do
numb.
you know why that is? Because you're
Um,
just not intelligent enough for
I'm
DC
not intelligent.
movies.
That's really what it is. Is that I'm just not smart enough.
Zack Snyder he's visionary.
He is a visionary. Yeah, I mean,
I can't even begin to explain really what goes through his mind.
he's a
It
genius. I mean,
he
Man of Steel. It makes perfect sense to me that Superman has absolutely no regard for human life at all. That is completely in Superman's character.
obviously. I mean it's
You know,
everything, and also Batman. Batman just he loves killing people.
he just loves killing.
It's his entire Rick and Morty. It's his entire being, isn't it? I mean, it's Batman's whole reason to exist is just to murder people, and not murder them nicely, sort of in a way that would cause less pain. It's
Really
murdering them
brutal. It's tortuous, frankly.
brutally, in such a way that he breaks every bone in their body. And
It's like that.
Superman
It's that.
obviously wants to kill Batman and
Yeah,
just
yeah, absolutely, spot on. It's that bit in Batman Begins when Batman pulls someone's teeth out with a hammer, and then has a massive fight with a bunch of people in a hallway, and then it turns out he was like screwing his sister the whole time. Turns out that Rachel was his sister. How weird. Maybe that's why she left and they replaced her with Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Wait, where does Harrison Ford come into this? Where does he slot in? Where's Han Solo in this? Or am I thinking of a different film?
Dude, I'm talking about Old Boy.
Of
Oh no! Oh,
course.
come on now. What were you
Oh.
thinking of?
Well, I mean, when we started talking about, sisterly love, I was thinking of Star Wars.
Oh no, dude, that hammer with the teeth. It's like a very famous scene from Old Boy.
No,
This
I'm
is
thinking of
why
Star Wars.
this is why you had to say at the beginning that you're not a film guy. This right here is that in practice.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm
Just to be clear, is my sarcasm coming across here? Is that coming across? Just to be clear.
no, I'm fully writing this up on your report card.
Oh, okay, great. I'm happy about that. That's
I'm
good.
fully writing this up on your
What do I get for my final end of year grade? Do I get a first in film
Well,
studies?
honestly, you didn't convince me
Oh,
with Batman v Superman.
okay. What
So
if I went on a 15-minute long rant about how Zack Snyder is literally the most intelligent being in the universe?
I think he might be. I mean, he's outdone Alan Moore in his own game, basically.
Wow.
I feel the need to
The thing
elaborate.
is, though, that's a low bar, though.
Can
To
I
be
just
fair.
throw this out here because I feel blasphemous even saying that. We are being sarcastic. Alan Moore is maybe the greatest writer in history, and we are being sarcastic. Please don't at me. Okay. Alan,
You're gonna
the
get
fact
cancelled. You're gonna get cancelled by
the,
everyone.
I haven't even started yet, and I'm being cancelled. Um, I can't even believe. Honestly, it's worse for me to compare Zack Snyder to Alan Moore than it is for me to compare Batman v Superman to Citizen Kane, because I love Alan Moore that much. I think Alan Moore for me is like such a paragon because he completely defies anything that we understand about what constitutes an intellectual. He's just like this frumpy looking old dude with a
I love his beard.
t-shirt
I
and his
mean, his
beautiful beard,
beard.
and he looks like a wizard, and he is a wizard. But as soon as he opens his mouth, like everything he says is just pure gold.
He's a bit like what would happen if Gandalf fucked a really hot emo chick.
It's
He's
uh,
he's
it's
what the offspring of that unnatural marriage.
what do you mean unnatural?
Well,
Gandalf would make a great partner to a big titty goth GF.
we're in strange waters now.
We are in strange. That's what you can expect from everything and nothing. I mean, that's why
Okay.
I said this is the place where we discuss certain back alley surgeries I may or may not have
I
had.
feel like this is a place to escape from a deep
Yes,
existential
let's
crisis.
escape the existential crisis. Talk about something else. I have to ask because you did bring up behind the scenes a certain
Mm.
aggravation towards a certain CBS
All access.
show,
On and
a
and in
certain show starring Sir Patrick Stewart. Obviously, we're talking about Recess. No, I'm kidding. We're talking about My Goldfish is Evil.
no, keep going. You're going to
We
get there eventually.
we get there
I mean,
eventually. We're talking about Hey
but
Arnold.
just be quick. I don't want you to call it Star Trek. Can you avoid calling it Star Trek, please?
Should we give it a code name? We're talking about Picard.
Yeah,
But
can we
let's
just
give
call
it
it
a
Picard? I don't
let's
want to
give
give
it.
it Star
But
Trek.
it's not Picard either. He is not. That is not Picard.
No, it's not Picard, but it's. You say it's not Picard, but is it how Patrick Stewart wishes Picard would be?
Oh, but I lost so much respect for Patrick Stewart over the course of these brief few episodes.
I
They
mean,
didn't feel brief.
I was giving him the benefit of the doubt because I didn't realize that he was in the writing room.
Oh,
And when I found out he was, a producer and actually in the writing room and he signed off on this,
that is when the drinking began.
I well, the drinking's been going on a long time before that,
That's when
but
the drinking intensified.
it did intensify a little bit. I mean, I'm on lockdown. I've got nothing else to look forward to, and I'm watching Picard. And when he came out in an eye patch, it with what is the worst French. I mean, his French accent was exactly the same as the Pirates of the Caribbean Frenchman pirate lord.
No French accent will ever be as good as the French accents in Deus Ex, the original 2000 Deus Ex. Those French
I
accents
thought
were
you were going to say in Les Miserables.
No, oh dude, have you heard the French accents in Deus Ex? They are the worst, and I love them.
Are they great?
They're awful. Who are you?
Oh yes,
Grim,
yes,
greasy
that's it.
grisels. I love it.
Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's
But
classic.
Deus Ex can get away with it because it's so tongue in cheek, and the dialogue is so tongue in cheek. Like it can get away with having some of the most notoriously bad voice performances of all time because it's still a beautiful game. It's still a really really fantastic game.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean,
We're getting off topic. Back to Picard.
so Star Trek Picard is I don't quite know what happened. I was trying to follow the plot.
It's a bit like trying to navigate a maze with a blindfold on.
Let's use a Star Trek type sort of navigation joke in here. It'd be like trying to navigate an asteroid field. Now I can imagine that would be very difficult for a starship's computer to do, but it gets it done. But Picard, it would be like if the starship's computer had about 50 viruses on it. It's okay. Let's just. I'm gonna give Picard a bit of credit in three areas, and I've got three things noted down that I liked.
You liked it when it was over.
That can be number 4. It ended.
It didn't. They're coming back for season 2.
Yeah, I know, and Whoopi Goldberg's going to be in it. Whoopi Goldberg's going to be in it. Good old Whoopi.
Well, that fills me with confidence.
Guinan, she's back.
She's my favourite. Remember what was it? Theodore Rex.
Oh. No.
Thanks for that.
I mean, next they'll tell us that Neelix is coming back, and I'll just crawl into a small vat of acid. So, Picard. So, the first thing I liked about it, and I have to give credit to the people that do the visual effects in this show.
They tried. They hold their weight.
They do a good job with the nightmare that they're given to work on.
Yeah.
But you know, at the end of the day, there is someone working on that and working extremely hard to put that show together. And then I'm going to say the same thing for the audio as well. The people that are doing the actual audio for all the the laser shots and the phases and things, it is actually quite amazing that they the amount of work that they put into it. So I'm purely saying that not because it's groundbreaking visual effects or anything, but just purely
competent.
It's competent. Done. And there are people obviously that work hard on it. And I often find that when people do these online shows, they're too quick to say, oh, it's just CGI. But, at the end of the day, CGI is an art form, and there are people that work hard on that. So just, saying, oh, it's just CGI is a little bit of a kick in the teeth to the poor people that work on that.
Yeah, it's hard work. It's difficult. I mean, if you ever look at like The Amazing Bulk, I feel like we're just sort of automatically diverting our brains to anything that's been on Best of the Worst. But The Amazing Bulk is a good example. It's hard work. It's difficult.
Yeah.
When I was in university, I mean, I'm still in university, but when I was doing my undergrad, I watched 3 people slave for weeks over making a bee, like a little CGI bee on someone's hand, and it was beautiful. It takes ages. We can't take that away from all the very talented women and men who worked on Picard to make it look good.
For a TV show, it's film quality, isn't it? And I mean, I know that
that's not unusual these days, but it's
not unusual these days. But you know what I'm saying? It is impressive. And the only thing that I don't give them a pass on in that respect is the copy and paste of starships, especially Starfleet. With the Romulans, they did have a uniform style, but for Starfleet has so many different types of ship, in all different configurations, because they are not a military force. They are an exploration force. So I don't give them a pass on that, but everything else I will give them a pass on.
You give them a tick.
Yeah, and then number 3, as much as I hate it in the context, and this is probably just my nostalgia, I do quite like the data scene at the end. As much as I hate everything.
Yeah. Are you talking about the bit when Data reveals that his mother's name is Martha?
No, stop it, you. Stop it. But what I mean
Love
is
that bit.
Everyone, I mean, Star Trek Nemesis. I want to be clear that Star Trek Nemesis is not a good film. Is
that the one with Tom Hardy?
It is, and it single-handedly destroyed Tom Hardy's career for the better part of.
That was the very first thing I ever saw Tom Hardy in, because I had that movie on VHS. Because my mum's friend Ray, shout out to Ray, my mum's friend Ray just gave us all these movies on VHS, including Blade Runner. So we've got him to thank for that.
But Nemesis had an awful ending for Data, where, I mean, of course, altruism and giving up your life for the good of everyone else is great and all, but
yeah,
I did quite like this little send off for Data. I mean, Brent Spiner does not want to play Data anymore.
He doesn't. He's done with it.
He's been done with it for years. He was done with it even when they were doing the original TNG films. Yeah. So, the fact that they got him to come back and do a bit of a touching farewell for such an iconic character is, I quite like that. I wish the scene as a whole wasn't shit, but I will at least give it a pass. The only thing I found frustrating is, I'm about to say the only thing I found frustrating about Picard. No, everything was frustrating. Come on, brain, kick in.
That's the drink.
In Star Trek Next Generation,
Yeah.
who is Data's best friend? Geordi LaForge.
Geordie LaForge is my best friend.
Well, he can be everyone's best friend. I mean,
It's true, he can.
but he is Data's best friend. If Data was going to want anyone to fulfill his sort of final life experience, almost,
It's going to be Geordie.
he would want Geordie to do it, because all of his development as a human, so to speak, was as a result less of Picard. I mean, there is that one episode, of course, where they have a trial about whether or not Data can be classified as having sort of human-esque rights. But other than that episode, all of his life experiences come from Geordie LaForge. And Geordie is the one person that treats him from the start not as a machine, but as a being, something that can grow and develop and through experiences. So I find it frustrating that Geordie has nothing. He's not in it. It doesn't make sense, the narrative. If you replace Picard with Geordie,
but no one's gonna watch a show called Star Trek Geordie.
Geordie Shaw.
Geordie Shaw, Star Trek edition.
That would be a nightmare.
Let's CBS hit us up. We have a beautiful pitch for you. Geordie Shaw, Star Trek edition. Give us royalties. That's all we ask. You can take the idea. Just give us stuff. Just give us stuff.
Anything really. You know, I'm cheap. You know, I'll do a lot. Anyone that knows me knows I'm easy and cheap. So
it's true. You are. It took me no longer than about 5 minutes to get you in
restraining order.
Did you just press the restraining order button?
I did.
Oh, here it comes now. It's being pushed under my door. They're quick.
But that is my positives of Picard, and as you can see, they're not exactly glowing. It is superficial.
You're really stretching them thin.
I am, and now we go into what happened. I mean, in a simple story structure, you have a starting point, then you have a middle section and an end, and you have the arc, don't you, of a character.
Just a basic 3-act structure is what you describe.
Yes, a basic 3-act structure. But Picard has a very long beginning act, which seems to last for the better part of 5 episodes. I mean, they spend 3 episodes just on Earth until they leave Earth, which, as I was watching it, I sort of thought to myself, you could condense everything that happened in the first 3 episodes into one, and would you have really lost anything?
If anything, you would have gained something, and that is, you would have gained back the dignity that you lost watching those first 5 episodes.
Well, yes, and then we cut sort of their first stop on the way to where they're trying to get to is the scummy criminal planet. And it was at that point that I realised I wasn't watching Star Trek. So if I was to ask you what the overriding ethical theme of Star Trek is, what is the point of Star Trek? Is it...
Yeah, I mean, this is something which the Red Letter Media guys have talked about ad nauseum. And that is, you know, Roddenberry's vision is obviously a utopian one. It's not, you know, which is in many ways fascinatingly at odds with his contemporaries. You know, when you look at Cold War science fiction, it tends to fixate, and often very successfully fixate, upon alienation, urban decay, the nuclear threat. You know, I mean, we just mentioned Blade Runner, we just mentioned androids. You know, William Gibson, and I'm going to do another plug. Living Prose just did an upload about True Names, and you know, you've got these great thick of the Cold War sci-fi works which are defined by their pessimism. You know, I think what makes Star Trek and what makes Roddenberry's vision interesting is that it almost willfully differs from that.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit differed from basically everything else about literature going on during the war period.
Yeah.
So that's my final answer. Do I win? Anything?
I'm going to summarize that in one word: hope. Hope for a better tomorrow. Because you're exactly right. It's set during Cold War, and
well, it's not set during Cold War. It was written during the Cold War.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. So Star Trek is the time when Star Trek came out, you've got Red Scare, you've got racism, on another level, you've got
mounting post-war anxiety.
Exactly. You've got so much going on, and then you have a TV show coming out of nowhere where you're combining everything that the world is saying shouldn't come together, and you've got it all coming together.
Yeah.
And it's painting a hopeful picture of tomorrow, saying that if we could just put aside our petty differences, maybe we could work together to reach space and explore.
And Picard basically just wants to be Blade Runner plus Star Wars, forgetting that Blade Runner and Star Wars don't mix.
The only bit of it that sort of did make a bit of sense for his character was when he was on the Romulan planet. And
are you talking about the bit when he says that his mum's name is Martha?
Yes, I am. But he takes the sign. He takes the sign, the no human sign off the fence. I mean, it does contradict a little bit, because in TNG he probably would have said something to the effect of, we can't interfere with other people's beliefs, etc. It's not for us to enforce things on them. But from his own personal standpoint, rather than from a purely Star Trek based, a Starfleet based standpoint, he would be the sort of person to take a sign like that off and
Do you
show
really think so? He's always been diplomatic. That's his thing. So
he's always been diplomatic. So I wouldn't say it was a diplomatic move.
Yeah. So it runs against the grain of everything we know about Picard, which is that he is a diplomat.
The thing is, in his old age, I can get a bit of I'm over it.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart realizing that he signed up to be in Star Trek Picard and having a bit of a moment and destroying the set. It was completely unplanned. He just was very it's akin to like a cat pushing a glass off a table.
Exactly, and it looks at you as it does it, like this is my rebellion.
looking at the casting director behind the scenes as he ripped the thing off and threw it on the ground.
But I mean, let's analyze sci-fi as a whole in a way in relation to Picard, and I'm going to keep it on
that is a Herculean task.
And what I'm going to just quickly pitch to you is a rewrite of Picard to make it a little bit less, terrible. I would say, clunky. So you keep the basic plot line the same. So you have the overarching arc of him trying to find Soji, or whatever the hell her name is, the android.
Barry Manilow.
We'll make it Barry Manilow.
Trying to find Barry Manilow.
He is trying to find the android home planet, by extension Soji, and keep her safe because she is a descendant. I don't know how that works still. We're going to ignore the science. We're just going to accept that the premise is she's Data's daughter, even though it doesn't make sense. And it would have made far more sense for it to be Lal, is it? Who is his actual daughter that he made. But anyway, we will accept that premise as it is and say that's the overarching arc. What has happened to episodic sci-fi? Why can we not have a situation where every episode he goes to a new planet, the overarching arc is still there, he's looking for clues to try and track down the girl, but on every planet there's a standalone adventure of some description?
Yeah.
Now, I know that the easy answer to that is it costs more money to do that.
I guess so, but it's not impossible. I mean, the original Star Trek and the original, TNG
is episodic.
They proved that you could make a good episodic sci-fi on a budget.
Here's another one for you. Stargate.
I'm going to give you an even better one. Cowboy Bebop. Represent.
Yes.
Cowboy Bebop mastered episodic storytelling, and it works it perfectly into its
bingo.
Into its kind of milieu, into its aesthetic and its philosophy, in the way that everyone's like detached and it's like they're just drifting from adventure to adventure, and no one ever learns or gains anything. It's just
because I don't know what TV has against episodic style shows where they're. I mean, the last one that comes to mind is House. It's the last one that comes to mind where I think to myself there was an episodic format. I mean, I know there's Black Mirror on Netflix, which has its own, episodic sort of style.
But that's an anthology series.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Totally it is honor bound to be episodic by nature.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna. This isn't an answer as to why sci-fi in particular hates episodism, but an answer to why TV has strayed away from episodism. In my opinion, it begins with The Sopranos.
Yes.
I think The
The
Sopranos was
golden age of TV. What a nightmare.
I love The Sopranos. I'm just throwing that out there. So The
Do you
Sopranos is
love
a
the ending?
wonderful. Yes, I do. I think it's a perfect ending for The
Is
Sopranos.
it? I quite like the fact that it's left open it's open ended, isn't it? In the sense that
Yes,
you
yes,
don't know on purpose, I think, whether or
yes.
not he died or
You've got the guy at the bar who could easily be there to
yeah.
kill him. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's The Sopranos. It was the first. People could probably fact check me on this and tell me I'm wrong, but in my opinion, it was the first like major prestige television show that had a big market outside the US and in other countries. And the UK has been doing prestige television since the 80s with things like Smiley's People with Alec Guinness,
Doctor Who.
which is all. Oh, come on, Doctor Who is not prestige television. um
Groundbreaking.
to anybody who hasn't seen the exceptional Cold War drama Smiley's People, it is on YouTube for free. Go watch it, it's brilliant. But The Sopranos no one knows what Smiley's People is. It's like this obscure little thing from '82, whereas The Sopranos is this major, groundbreaking cinematic experience, and it maintained viewership by having an overarching kind of story. It was semi-episodic. Same with things like Breaking Bad, where Breaking Bad still has like a thing that they're doing on an episode per episode basis, but it had more of a sense of continuity in a way that I don't think TNG did, or Cowboy Bebop, or any of the ones we just said. So we can probably blame The Sopranos.
So that is the naughties answer, isn't it? The Sopranos, because I think when did that finish airing? Was that about 20? Was it 2000 and?
You're testing my memory.
10?
We
2009?
talking about The Sopranos, or are we talking about
Sopranos?
Because The Sopranos ended in 2007, I think.
Oh, a little bit earlier than I thought.
So you're probably getting it mixed up with Breaking Bad, which ended my
that was
life.
2014, wasn't it, or 15? I think.
Oh, dude, I don't even know. I don't even know who I am anymore.
But you know what I'm going to mention now as being the final nail in the coffin for episodic TV.
Please don't say it.
I'm going to say it. Game of Thrones.
It was Game of Thrones, wasn't it?
I think it was. And I don't understand what the fixation is with trying to make TV like films. They are different mediums. A film is, let's say 90 minutes to 2 hours. And you tell a story in that time. Picard is a 10-hour long film. It's the long and short of it. That is the long and short of it. And that's the reason why it feels like such a mess. Because you can't stretch a film script into 10 hours.
Don't get me wrong. That can be done well. If it's
Lord of the Rings.
Don't you say it. That can be done well. I'm going to say, you've got things like Mindhunter on Netflix. Mindhunter is very much, like this one long continuous narrative.
It can be done well.
Even
Not
across
everything
seasons.
needs to be it.
But Mindhunter is exceptional, and Picard is like a violent yeast infection by comparison.
I feel like, in general, sci-fi doesn't lend itself to a 10-hour long film type situation.
Really? Why is that? Why sci-fi in particular? Because I'm going to disagree with you there, because you can't really define sci-fi in generic terms.
Let me. Okay, I won't. Maybe I'm being a bit too broad stroke here. When you look at least the history of science fiction on TV, what are the shows that immediately come to mind?
Coronation Street, Dallas,
okay,
and The Rockford Files.
We're in a nightmare zone now.
Can you imagine if Coronation Street was like a Mad Maxian, like Coronation Street is the strip where they all go to have like violent motorcycle duels?
In fairness, didn't Doctor Who and Coronation Street do a crossover, or was that EastEnders?
Oh, I think it was
for children in need. I think
it was EastEnders, and honestly, I try to block most of Doctor Who out of my brain.
The fact that I know that, by the way, is I feel dirty. I just want to put that out.
You were talking about sci-fi and episodism.
So I was saying to you, when you think of sci-fi, or in particular sci-fi television shows, what do you think of? What's the go-to?
The number one is obviously going to be Star Trek.
Yeah.
Other than that, my mind would tend towards something like The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
I am going to say Quantum Leap because I used to love that as a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Doctor Who, obviously. Doctor Who
Doctor
is.
Who, Stargate,
I've never seen Stargate. I'm very sorry. The Rockford Files.
The
Um,
X-Files.
I'm kidding. The Rockford Files has nothing to do with sci-fi. I don't know why I keep saying the Rockford Files.
But the X-Files.
But the X-Files, yes.
I think we've got enough there.
I think there's enough there, yeah.
So, what's the commonality there? What's the theme?
Wait, obviously you're leading me in the direction of episodism, but I don't think what you're saying is necessarily fair because we're talking about for one thing, we just named a bunch of shows that have basically nothing in common in terms of when they were made.
Hey,
we're talking about
let's spin that back a little bit. Just let me cut in there. So you're saying they were made at different times. Well, X-Files is 90s. Star Trek was 90s.
Yeah, but what about the original Star Trek, which was the 60s?
That was the 60s, but I'm saying for this particular discussion, it's more about TNG and Voyager and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, but we're talking about sci-fi as a whole, and what you're saying is sci-fi as a whole
it does lend itself more.
I just don't think that's true. I think Star Trek does, but I don't think sci-fi as a whole can be pigeonholed that way. Because keep in mind, Japan have been doing. I mean, just anime has a whole kind of cornerstone of its market, which is definitively.
Let's be very clear here. I am not sort of talking about. I'm talking more Western.
Yes,
than I am.
But we can't deny that we cannot pigeonhole sci-fi that way. The existence of anime proves that science fiction can deal in long, non-episodic arcs.
I'm not saying that it can't. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to say that it has to follow this format, but I'm just saying that there are, when you name, at least TV show wise, there is a commonality there. People grew up watching episodic sci-fi, and there is a little bit.
What you're saying is still a non sequitur because there's more to be accounted for in the instances of these various TV shows than just what's good or appropriate for them. There's also the factor of budget, for instance. The way that screenplays are written from case to case functions very differently now than it did then. I mean, Jesus.
Exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make. You've just hit the nail on the head. Is the shift, the paradigm shift we've had in the way that TV screenplays have to be written. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect between what audiences expect from Star Trek and that form of show and what we now get on a pretty regular basis. That's the disconnect that I'm talking about.
Let's then say that Star Trek Picard isn't Star Trek, for that reason among plenty of other reasons.
Yes.
Is that inherently a bad thing?
No, but it becomes a bad thing if you then start saying that it is Star Trek.
It becomes a bad thing if it's done horribly wrong.
Yes.
It's, we can't deny the fact that Star Trek Picard is a clumsy, poorly written disaster, which is the real reason it sucks. But you can't help but feel like it's symptomatic of something. It's symptomatic of the fact that the people writing it don't know what Star Trek is, and the way that they've written it, and everything you're saying about it divorcing itself from the legacy of Star Trek and the way Star Trek is as a narrative and its episodic structure, them abandoning all that really is a symptom of them not knowing Star Trek.
But if you take out Picard from it and you put a new main character in, and you take away references to things like the Borg, and you take Seven of Nine out, and then you have the standalone crew that they had in there, and this was almost a Blade Runner-esque type story, it would function better.
It would still suck, though.
It would suck, but it would function better, and it would probably lead to a slightly more interesting universe. Yeah. Because this happening in the world of Star Trek, it's completely dead, isn't it?
It feels like a slight to everything Roddenberry developed.
And I think that's what I find the most insulting.
Yeah.
Is that why did they? I mean, I know why they've got Star Trek on it. It's because Star Trek is a known IP, and you can market that.
Yes, it's marketable. It's got a huge audience,
and you've got suckers like me that will watch it. But do you know what I'm saying? You've got people like me and you that will sit there and watch it, and once you start watching it, I don't know about you, I couldn't stop. I had to watch it until the end. I had
I had
to.
to. Are you kidding me? I had to force myself to watch it. The only reason I watched it was so I could talk about it with a friend who
But
is also a massive Star Trek fan.
I'm not watching it out of a sense of enjoyment. I'm watching it a bit like someone watches a train crash.
It's morbid curiosity.
Exactly. You can't take your eyes off it because everything is. I mean, I could sit here forever and nitpick all the things that they got wrong from Star Trek in it. But my overriding issue with it is that it forgets everything that Star Trek is. It's meant to be a hopeful vision for the future, and it doesn't hit any of those targets. I mean, people are addicted to drugs, and like there's almost like currency in the world. I'm like looking at this going, Star Trek doesn't have a currency in it. I mean, maybe other planets would, but the Federation doesn't use a currency in the same way as we would recognize it, at least not in Starfleet. So what kind of world is this? And then you chuck in like the black market for Borg parts, and you think to yourself, wait a minute, the Borg don't seem to be a threat. You've got a cube under control here with no issues. You've got all the Borgs in a state of never-ending hibernation. They were the biggest threat to the universe, and yet they're nullified now. They're nothing, and yet you're salvaging their parts. But why? Your technology must be superior to theirs to have beaten them. It doesn't compute. None of it makes sense. It's all almost backwards.
So
baffles me.
all of this raises the question: what's next for Star Trek?
Nothing.
Is it dead? Is it officially dead?
I mean, I've gone back and watched Discovery, and I think we mentioned this earlier.
Discovery sucks, but it certainly looks better with retrospect.
Yes, and I look at that and I at least go, especially some of the characters. I mean, Captain Pike in it from the latest series actually felt like a Star Trek captain. And Saru feels like he would fit in on a starship as well. I still have issues with Burnham, but I don't actually think that's the actor's fault, or
it's shoddy writing.
It was, and unfortunately, when you give a human no emotions, it doesn't. There's a disconnect there.
She is awful though. Can I just put it out there? The actress who plays Michael Burnham is dreadful. I'm thinking of the
Walking
bit.
Dead, isn't she?
I don't remember. Green Ornstein and I laugh about this all the time, but it's the bit when she says, "No, he died," and it somehow outdoes the M. Night Shyamalan, Mark Wahlberg, The Happening bit. It outdoes it. You know, like the whole.
You're going to say it outdoes Last Airbender. Nothing outdoes that.
Nothing outdoes the Last Airbender. That's obviously the greatest movie ever made. I particularly like the bit at the end when Aang reveals that his mother's name is Martha. Really impactful. Really hit me right there. But it's you know the bit in The Happening when he's like, I mean everyone knows the bit in The Happening that I'm talking about. It's like, what? No, ma'am, we're not.
It
was like that.
It's such an odd film, isn't it?
Oh, let's not talk about The Happening. I don't have the energy.
We don't have the time. We could be sat here talking about The Happening for years.
Literally for years. By the time we finished talking about The Happening, the pandemic would be over and we'd be free to go. And we both would have died from malnutrition and the entire thing would have been a hallucination.
But you asked me what the future is for Star Trek. And beyond me jesting that I think it's dead, I don't think Star Trek is dead. I think Star Trek is on life support and it's in a coma. And it just needs a cuddle and it needs someone to say to it, it'll be okay. I mean, as I say, there's a few things from Discovery that do give me a little bit of hope. Now that they've gotten Spock out of their system and maybe they'll give Michael Burnham a chance to actually turn into a character, maybe there's a chance they might be able to resurrect that slightly compared to this.
I think you're being a little too optimistic.
I'm being very optimistic. Yum, am I right? I've resigned myself to knowing that I'm not going to get episodic Star Trek. So if they're not going to do that format, and the appearances are that they're not going to, then I will settle for something that they need to completely divorce themselves from anything to do with the original series, Next Generation, any pre-existing Star Trek.
Yeah.
They need to divorce themselves from that completely. And part of the reason why I'm saying Discovery might have a hint of hope is they went into a different universe or area. So if they're doing something that's just completely away from all existing Star Trek,
it might have the potential to not be garbage.
Might have the potential to be garbage and not impact any pre-existing Star Trek.
I think they should just hand it to David Fincher, because for some reason he knows how to make everything good.
Well, I mean, I would just mention Star Wars and Mandalorian as well quickly.
Yes, The Mandalorian was wonderful. It was very good. It was like Firefly. Reminded me quite a bit of Firefly.
And guess what? Pretty episodic, right?
Yeah, no, it was done. It was done wonderfully. I think I'm a big proponent for episodic storytelling because I love Cowboy Bebop so much, and I think it can be used in a way that is really fulfilling. You know, having just a good, well-written story that you can just drop into.
Exactly.
Is fantastic. You could drop into any episode of Cowboy Bebop, and it could be your first.
It's great. Cowboy Bebop is beautiful.
Cowboy Bebop's the gold standard as far as that's concerned.
It's great. And my hope is that, much in the same way that everyone looked at Deadpool and then went, we've got to have me some of that, I'm hoping that a lot of these studios look at Mandalorian, and look at the response it got, and sort of say to themselves, well, wait, that had an overarching arc, but it also had different stories in each episode. Yeah. I just hope to high heaven that someone grasps that concept and goes, oh, we can just do both, and then it all slots into place nicely.
Yeah, because it's not impossible.
It's not impossible, and I can see Discovery doing something like that, because Discovery, if they are stranded in, I mean, it'll be a rehash of Voyager, but I'll leave that. But they could be stranded somewhere and have to beam down to a planet and get some sort of resource or something, and there's, I don't know, aliens on that planet. Who knows? And
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. And he's literally a rock, just an inanimate object with a mouth and eyes. Yeah, and he just sings "You're Welcome" at them.
And he just sings "You're Welcome." Yeah, I mean, we've just written CBS, hit us up. We just wrote an episode of Star Trek for you. You're welcome. You can have that one for free. We don't even demand royalties.
Exactly. Although, to be fair, Disney would probably eviscerate us. We'd have to do a rewrite of "You're Welcome" and just change it to something very British, like we're mildly infused that you decided to pop by.
To anybody listening to this that isn't in the UK, that is a very popular phrase that we say all the time.
Is it?
Literally every day. I think at least once a day for the last 12 years I've said the phrase, I am mildly enthused that you decided to pop by. You won't know this because we didn't start recording straight away, but literally the first thing we said to each other was, and we said it in perfect unison. It's honestly pretty creepy. We said, I am mildly enthused that you decided to pop by.
90% of this has just been sarcasm. I just want to point that out.
Honestly, it's because both of us are dying inside, and the sarcasm helps.
And it's the only way that I can cope with what I've witnessed.
The existence of Picard.
And the existence of Picard. But I'm glad that you gave me a chance just to talk about some of my frustration. I mean, I could sit here and talk for hours about Picard, but I'm not going to, because I feel like I've already done enough damage to your psyche and my own.
I think the biggest tragedy is that if anybody started listening to this and was hooked by my promise of an enthralling tale of how I ended up having one of my kidneys removed and being left in a bathtub full of ice, I haven't talked about that even once. Anyway, I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
If there's anything else you've seen that isn't Picard, anything new that you've seen.
You don't want to talk about Doctor Who, do you?
Honestly, I would sooner slit my own wrists, frankly.
Okay, can I? Okay, I'm not going to talk about Doctor Who, but I will give you a summary of the latest series, in 5 words. Well, no, I'll do it in 1 word: sad, and then I'll just leave it there.
Okay, good talk.
And it's sad. Sorry, it's sad in multiple ways. One, I feel really sorry for the actress. I feel, because Jodie Whittaker, I imagine. I mean, I've never seen Broadchurch. I think she's
very good in Broadchurch. She deserves better, is what I'm going to say.
Yes.
We actually, funny thing is, we talked about Doctor Who and we talked about Jodie Whittaker in the last Everything and Nothing.
Okay. Well, there you go then. Well. Anyway, I just will say that I feel really sorry for her, and I feel like she's being given probably the worst writing in Doctor Who history. And I'm not just talking about sort of current Doctor Who. I'm talking about like Doctor Who from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think she's got the worst stuff ever. And
she has been handed a raw deal.
Yeah, and also, and it doesn't help her that there is a lot of weirdos on the internet that are quite alt-right and just make lots of negative, stuff about Doctor Who.
Are you talking about yourself?
Not me. I mean, as much as I hate the latest series, I don't blame her. I blame storylines and Chibnall, who I had a little bit of hope that, because I mean, I really didn't like Stephen Moffat, and I didn't enjoy. I mean, I watched all of the Doctor Who with Matt Smith, and I watched all the Doctor Who with Peter Capaldi, and Peter Capaldi's storylines were quite good, and his last series in particular with Bill Potts was quite interesting.
It was good in places. I'm not going to say it was good overall. It had good bits.
Yeah, and even in this latest series, there was one episode that sticks out for me, which is the one with the haunted house and the Cyberman in there.
Dude, and this means nothing to me. I didn't watch it.
Well, if you get a chance to watch one Doctor Who episode, I would recommend you watch that one, because it's based effectively on the story of how Frankenstein was written.
If I get a chance to watch one Doctor Who episode, it's going to be Blink.
I wouldn't, actually. As much as I like Blink, it's not. You're better off watching the what's it called? I should know this off the top.
Empty Child.
Yes, you're better watching that.
I've seen the Empty Child. I've seen all of these episodes, by the way. It's just Blink is my favorite.
Okay, but the only reason why I suggest watching this particular episode from this series is it's sort of great as long as you don't have to watch anything else. The rest of the series ruins it. As a standalone episode, it's great. Everything else sucks. But yeah, Doctor Who has fallen into a pit of. I mean, I thought Star Trek Picard was bad. I mean, Doctor Who makes that look Oscar worthy. That's the level that Doctor Who has sunk to. It is shocking how bad it is. I can't put into words how bad Doctor Who is, the last series. And as I say, I just feel so sorry for people that have, these actors that obviously do put time and effort into their performances, and what they're being given to work with is honestly, it's shoddy. I don't like shitting all over people that, I mean, I'm sure those writers put work into it, and
we're called Curmudgeon Media. You are allowed to be as curmudgeonly as you want.
I don't want to shit all over people just for the sake of shitting on them, because I feel like people get shit on enough. But I do feel like it is shoddy, and it's a shame that Doctor Who is. I mean, Doctor Who is not award winning, don't get me wrong, but it is a cultural icon, and it's just been reduced to.
It deserves better.
It deserves better. It could have so much better. Imagine if it just had a little bit more budget and some decent writers. It could be. Doctor Who could be the greatest sci-fi show of all time.
It could have been a contender. But unfortunately, it could never have been the greatest sci-fi series of all time, because Cowboy Bebop exists. Okay? And Cowboy Bebop will always be the greatest sci-fi ever. Don't at me.
Okay. I mean, I'm looking at my desk right now, just to be clear, and I have a Dalek and 2 starships from Star Trek on my desk, and they are looking at me as if to say, "Please save us." I wish you would say.
I'm looking at my desk, and I have lip balm and my wallet, and they aren't looking at me at all.
But you asked me if there was anything else I wanted to discuss, and I'm not going to discuss Doctor Who because I've given my 5 cents on that. But I thought, in the spirit of us sort of talking about Blade Runner relatively soon, I would just talk a little bit then about Ridley Scott.
Senile old Ridley Scott.
Okay, when I say that, I'm going to be clear. I'm not going to be talking about Prometheus or Alien Covenant, which I despise. Especially Alien Covenant, which, my God, I've never witnessed. I watched that in the cinema with my dad, who is the biggest Alien fan imaginable, and we both just sort of, I don't know,
died forever.
Died a little bit inside, but more than that, let's talk Ridley Scott. And then my closing line about Alien Covenant is this: why does every single film always have to have a horrible ending? One of the uniquely charming things about sort of some of those big sci-fi hits of the 80s was that quite a lot of them had quite a nice ending. You know, you
Yeah, I
have
mean it's
Predator.
it's not Chinatown, is it? We're not we're not
No,
in Chinatown here, guys.
no. But what I'm trying to say is, why have they got to? Why has everything got to? I mean, the ending of Alien Covenant, where he wakes her up, or sorry, he's there and he puts her in cryosleep, and you know, he's got those alien embryos, and I just think to myself, like, my God, what a fucking depressing ending. Why?
It needs to feel earned, and in my opinion, a
Does.
pessimistic ending needs to be
Uh,
directed. It needs to be directed in order to be earned. So I just mentioned Chinatown. Um, Film noir is sort of fixated upon a certain existentialism. Film noir has a reason to be pessimistic. You know, film noir is about shining. I said this in our Out of the Cast about Fargo, but film noir is directed at revealing the pessimistic parts of reality. That is
yeah,
part of its realism. You know, film noir is said to have come from two places: poetic realism, French poetic realism, and German expressionism. And what it
yes,
borrows from both of those, on one hand, it is a predilection for the pessimistic, and on the other hand, it is a desire to reveal the truth. And when Chinatown ends and Faye Dunaway is shot to death and the bad guys win, it is revealing something about the way the world is and who has power, and the fact that at the end of the day there is nothing they can do about it. Alien Covenant doesn't have that. It doesn't have the real philosophical weight. I can't even believe we first we're comparing Citizen Kane to Batman v Superman, then we're comparing Alan Moore to Zack Snyder, and now we're comparing Chinatown to Alien Covenant, and I've
I
never
mean
felt
it
filthier.
it is filth, isn't it?
It is
But
Phil.
when I was, what I wanted to say about Ridley Scott was I wanted to actually talk positively about him. But I want to talk about just sort of some of the positives. I mean, the last film of his that I watched that I liked was 2016's The Martian with Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
And while it's not, you know, it's not a great film by any means, it's not, you know, groundbreaking, but it is a good sort of space film that's almost within touching distance, isn't it, of our current scientific level.
It's not very far-reaching speculative fiction.
No, it's quite close by, and it's got quite a nice sort of storyline. It's quite simple in what it's trying to portray. Man is stuck. Man needs to survive. Get home. I quite like. It's Castaway, isn't it?
It's Castaway, but it's far more optimistic than Castaway.
Exactly, and it's got a nice vibe to it. And one particular scene that sticks out to me is the moment where he's just walking round his habitation area, and he sort of talks to himself and says, "I'm not going to die here."
Oh
And
yeah. The bit when it turns out his mother's name is Martha. I'm gonna flog that dead horse,
please,
and
please keep flogging it.
it will never be funny, and I'm gonna keep flogging it because just to spite you.
Thank you.
That's the
I
only reason I'm doing
appreciate
it.
it. I like that. I like a bit of, you know, I like being
Spite.
tortured, and spite. It's my go-to, really. But that particular scene, it was an example of what I quite like in Ridley Scott's filmmaking, and why I maybe didn't like Alien Covenant very much, is his films are about, to me at least, survival. And often you find that theme in his films. I mean, after rewatching Blade Runner, the
Yeah.
central theme of Blade Runner, for at least the replicants, is survival and having
I
their
would.
lives cut short.
I feel like
Maybe not central theme. Maybe I'm being a
I'm
bit
gonna say
hyperbolic.
you're dramatically simplifying Blade Runner by saying that.
I love dramatically simplifying things.
I wouldn't say it's a theme as much as it is a story element.
It's, yeah, there we go. We'll
It
call
is
it a
the it
story
is
element.
it's the motivation of Roy Batty is to survive. He just wants the
Exactly.
right to survive, like any
Exactly.
being.
Like any being, and I quite like that narrative. And then in Alien, you know, you've of course got, you know, the overarching. I mean, the main feeling in Alien is
It's
claustrophobia. I
it's
find,
survival horror, isn't it? It's
yeah,
survival horror. It is
in
the
its
it is the
purest form.
godmother. It is the godmother of survival horror.
Alien is lightning in a bottle. You know,
Only strikes once.
exactly. But anyway, I was thinking about that in relation to the Martian and things, and then I compared it to Alien Covenant, and as I watched that, I sort of thought to myself, well, wait a sec, I can see the survival theme again in here, not from a human perspective, but from the perspective of Michael Fassbender's character in it. I don't know if you can see what I mean.
I'm gonna call Tosh on that because Alien Covenant was a shoddy movie, and you are seriously stretching. You're stretching. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna cut. Can you cut this out then?
No.
No, please cut it out.
Okay.
I want it cut. This is an example of where I want it cut. Let me just rewind a bit and just talk a bit more about Ridley Scott. I'm going to cut that bit about Alien Covenant out. The main reason is, okay, I want to talk about this is because of Blade Runner, and after rewatching it today, and it's been a long time since I've watched Blade Runner, and it's one of those films where, at least to me, I could watch it 50 to 100 times and probably never fully get all the intricacies in it. Story-wise, it feels like it's got a bit of everything. There's so much going on in it throughout.
I think I disagree. But the reason for my disagreeing, I think, will be much more interesting to talk about in the Out of the Cast on Blade Runner. Because I've actually started reading the book. I've not finished the book, but I've started reading the book. And don't get me wrong, I love Blade Runner, but when you actually read the book, you realize just how much they cut out to make Blade Runner. And it makes perfect sense. Like, it's all in adaptation. You know, like what you can do in a book, you cannot do in a film. You need to condense it down. And they did a magnificent job of that. But comparatively, Blade Runner is very, very simple. Like the entire first chapter of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is literally fixating on his morning routine.
Yeah.
Or first chapter, and it's beautiful, and you learn so much about, you know, his wife is in it. Like he doesn't even have a wife in Blade Runner. Like his wife is in the past. Like, you know, Deckard was married, but his wife is in. I'm going to stop myself here because
we'll talk about this in the other one.
Save the conversation for then.
Yeah, but anyway, a little bit about Ridley Scott and just why I like him. I mean, I think
he remembers your birthday every year.
He does. He remembers my birthday every year, and I do you know what? I wish I could get a birthday card from him.
Well, look, I'm just saying, I send you a birthday card and
restraining order.
Yep.
but Alien might be my favorite film of all time.
That is a very good favorite film to have.
I love it. Everything about it, I love. There isn't anything about Alien that I can critique. It's one of those films where everything about it makes sense. I can't see any plot holes in it when I watch it. There's nothing that strikes you about any of the audios, any of the audio, or any of the visuals that makes you just sort of go, oh, that's dodgy, or everything about it.
My favorite thing about Alien is the pacing. The pacing is exceptional. Yeah. It is a crawl. It is an excruciating crawl. And the entire, like the first 40 minutes, you're just getting to know the characters.
Yeah.
You know, it really, it doesn't even have, until they all start dying, it doesn't really have a main character. No. Not until after they're all dead, and it's just...
If anything, Sigourney Weaver's character is not the main character.
Yeah, I mean, it really...
The majority of the film.
But the beauty of that, again, comes back to sort of hoodwinking us.
Yes.
Into not, you know, you don't know who's going to live and who's going to die, and you've got these major actors just dropping off the map. It's like Guy Pearce dying in the beginning of the Hurt Locker. It's like you don't know who's going to live and who's going to die. But it's one of the slowest movies I've ever seen, and in the best way possible. Like, when people say a movie is slow, they tend to mean that as an insult. In the case of a movie like Blade Runner, Alien, Suspiria, slow is good. Slow works well, and it's so tense, but it's so character driven as well. Like, you get to know Ripley so intimately.
You do.
You're so invested in her survival.
It's not just characters. It's the whole universe they create in that time that they have.
With very little.
And you believe it all.
Yeah.
That's what I find most amazing about Alien, is that, you know, you look at the computer technology, and it's obvious they're using, you know, the late 70s computers that they had, but you believe it from a futuristic standpoint. You believe that is the technology, and that's cutting edge. Even watching it now.
It's sort of tentative, like movies like Spike Jonze's Her. it's kind of
Yeah.
tentative with revealing when it is set. To my memory, I haven't seen the movie in like 8 years, but does it say when it's set?
I don't think Alien
I don't think
states when it's
Alien
set,
does. It's sort
but
of
Aliens definitely does.
Aliens is a very good movie, but I will always take Alien over Aliens.
The only other thing I'd say about it is I just love the opening of Alien. The opening sort of 5 minutes. I just love it. It's so good when
It's
when they show like the corridors that are empty. It just sets the mood
yeah.
more perfectly than I think any film I've ever watched. I
Except
just
for Batman v Superman.
yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. Zack Snyder, what a visionary! In
What a
fact,
visionary.
I want to see the Snyder cut of Alien.
I want to see release the Snyder cut.
Release the
Okay?
Snyder cut.
You heard it
of
here
Alien.
first. Release the Snyder cut of Alien. We're waiting for it. That should be a new thing. You know how like they like director's cuts are a thing? Snyder cuts should just be a thing. Zack Snyder doing his own cut of like
And then
every movie.
why not have a Michael Bay version of Alien as well?
That would be a Michael Bay version of Alien would be like Cave Johnson rewriting the entire literary canon.
Although, do you know what would work as a Michael Bay reinterpretation? Aliens.
Don't say
That could be hilarious.
I'm sorry, but Michael Bay is the non-thinking man's James Cameron.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like the ultimate parody, wouldn't it?
Yeah, except it wouldn't be a parody. If you want a parody of Aliens, just hand it to like Richard Ayoade and get him to do a Garth Marenghi's Darkplace on it. I love Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. I live for that show. I wish there was more than 6 episodes, but the fact that there are only 6 episodes kind of makes it special.
Let's get the Mighty Boosh going.
I feel like who cares about the Mighty Boosh? Everyone talks about the Mighty Boosh. Everyone knows what it is. I want to explain. If you don't know what Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is, because I understand it's kind of a niche show. I know you do, but people listening might not know what it is. Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is sort of an obscure British comedy from back in like 2004.
It's from the era of obscure British comedy.
The era of it, but it is the best obscure British comedy, and it is people talk an awful lot about how as soon as a bad movie director like Tommy Wiseau becomes aware of the fact their movie is bad and they try to capitalize on that consciously, it doesn't work. That proves how difficult it is to do that. And there are some movies and TV shows that manage to perfectly and deliberately emulate the bad movie formula, and they do it to a T.
They ride the line beautifully.
They ride the line beautifully. Black Dynamite is one of them. Danger 5 is one of them. Italian Spider-Man. For me, the crowning jewel, the S tier, is a little show, a 6-episode long miniseries called Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, which is basically a parody of Stephen King, I guess. It's a narrative within a narrative. So Matthew Holness plays a writer called Garth Marenghi, and the writer, Garth Marenghi, was approached by ITV in the 1980s and was tasked with writing a horror serial called Darkplace. So Matthew Holness plays Garth Marenghi, who plays a character called Rick Douglas, Dr. Rick Douglas, MD, which is one of the most just brilliant, hilarious names.
Great.
And they, in his own words, the studio gypped him because the show was really bad. He likes to believe it's because it was radical. In his words, it was so radical, so goddamn crazy that the studio gypped me. So in his words, his show was so radical that they weren't willing to put it on air. When they come back to him in 2004 and say, look, Garth, we got nothing. We need you to put your show out there with a few interviews attached. So he does. So Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is about a fictional TV show called Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, with Richard Ayoade and Matthew Holness and Matt Berry playing characters. And it is honestly fantastic. I've never seen anything quite so perfectly emulate the so bad it's good genre.
That's back before Matt Berry sold his soul over to do voiceovers on adverts.
Yeah, this was this was golden age. This was like, Matthew Holness hasn't done a whole lot since, but he's really good it as Garth Marenghi. But it's beautiful, and it's got lots of really subtle humor for anybody who appreciates like just the art of filmmaking. Like the Foley tends to be really, really loud. Like someone will pull a chair out, and the sound of the chair scraping against the ground, even if the ground is obviously carpeted, sounds like someone drawing like a chest across a marble floor very, very loudly.
Just quickly, can you imagine, just because we're talking about sort of the golden age of British crazy comedy, as I call it, can you imagine a American version of it? What that would be like?
it could. The thing is that unlike something like Peep Show, which is
Or IT
very
Crowd.
well, okay, but let's establish, because the IT Crowd did get an American release and it sucked.
Yeah.
Peep
That's
Show,
what I was sort
Peep,
of
Peep Show
leaning
is
towards.
Peep Show is going to get an American release and it's going to suck. But the thing is that Peep Show, I can't say the same for the IT Crowd, but Peep Show is so ingrained in the British sensibility. It's so ingrained in that stiff upper lip, complete aversion to honesty that is
Yes.
so ingrained in British culture.
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and
Yeah,
wave.
smile and wave. And it's got nothing to do with wanting to lie to people. It's got everything to do with just embarrassment and the fact that British culture is just repressed.
Literally, everyone constantly says that we Brits are, the nicest people on earth.
We're not.
We're just constantly embarrassed about everything. We're the most
constantly
socially
embarrassed about
awkward
everything.
people in the world.
But Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, I see no reason that couldn't be done well in America. And I say that purely because Black Dynamite exists.
Okay, yeah. I will retract my point then. I will accept that.
I'm assuming that Black Dynamite was made by, I believe it to be an American film, but
I think it is.
The fact alone that it is emulative of a distinctly American film culture is evidence enough.
Yeah.
But Danger 5 is the natural kind of progression for me from Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. But Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, it's 6 episodes of just bliss. It's got all these amazing little lines of dialogue, that really come out of nowhere, because every now and again it will cut away from the show and it will cut to the actors playing actors talking about the show, and I think my favourite line of dialogue in the entire thing is Richard Ayoade, as the producer of the show, Dean Lerner, sat there, and this is completely unconnected to the show at all, just saying, I had a cat once, dropped a sofa on it, it was a write-off, so I stood on its head. I believe that all life is sacred, which is why I personally feel really bad about the cat we killed.
To be honest, if there's one sort of reality-esque TV show that is worth watching, it's his Travel Man series.
Travel Man is very good, yeah. Richard Ayoade is a class act.
He is. I mean, the only other thing, should we end it there? We can end it there.
We could probably end it there.
We'll end it there. We'll end it with sort of the closing statement, which is a big thanks for having me on. I thought I would come and sort of bring some happiness into your life. As I say, I'm not a film major, and I'm not particularly intelligent when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I do look at stuff from the perspective of a layman, but I come at it from the angle more of an average film goer, and I don't pretend to be the most intelligent individual in the world when it comes to this stuff.
Well, it's been great.
So it's more interesting for me to hear someone that is actually pretty, I actually think you're fairly intelligent. So
you're
so
flirting with me again.
Oh, you noticed, did you?
Truth be told, the restraining order kind of threw me off the scent of the flirtation a little bit.
It's still in place. I mean, this is all one way. It's.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping by the end of this you'd lift it, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm not like disappointed or anything. It's fine.
Well, no, it just gives you a reason to bring me back onto the next one.
Do you have any closing statements?
You need to get a better PC set up.
Thank you for reminding me of the fact that A, I have limited funds. B, I'm currently doing a master's degree. And C, I stand by what I said, that Bush did 9/11.